You ever come home from a weekend trip to find your entire private lakefront property fenced off by your neighbor? Not just a section, not just your dock, everything. The shoreline, the trees, even a path to your boat. And worse, she's charging people money to walk onto your land. No, this isn't a fever dream. This was the opening salvo in what became the nastiest neighbor war our sleepy lakeside community had ever seen. And I was smack in the middle of it. Let me rewind just a bit. A few years back, I inherited a slice of heaven. 3 acres of lakefront property tucked away in a quiet rural pocket of the Midwest. It came from my grandfather, a man who could tell a fish story better than most folks could tell their own name. The land had been in our family for decades, and while it wasn't some sprawling estate you'd see in a magazine, it had something better: character. A small private dock, a gentle slope into clear water, and just enough trees to muffle the sounds of the outside world. From the moment I stepped foot on it as a new owner, I knew one thing. I wasn't just going to sit on it. I was going to preserve it, enhance it, make it into something my grandfather would have been proud to see passed down. And I did. Little by little, weekend by weekend, I put my hands in the dirt, cleaned out overgrown brush, repaired the dock, planted wildflowers along the shoreline, not because anyone told me to, but because this land mattered to me. And maybe that's where the trouble started. See, in a neighborhood full of folks who either rented weekend cabins or treated their lake homes like oversized garages, I stood out. My stretch of shoreline looked like something out of a nature documentary. Vibrant, clean, serene. Meanwhile, the lots next door, some had broken lawn chairs half submerged in the mud. One even had a rusted pontoon boat that looked like it hadn't floated since Y2K. I wasn't trying to show anyone up, but pride's a funny thing, especially when it's missing from someone's own backyard. My neighbor, whom I didn't know well at the time, let's call her Karen, because frankly, that's what she acted like, began showing signs early. At first, it was subtle. She'd linger when I was working near the shore, make comments like, "Wow, must be nice having a spot that basically takes care of itself." I smiled and nodded, but it didn't take care of itself. I did. Soon, she'd make jokes to other neighbors when we passed at the mailbox. Stuff like, "Guess all it takes to own lakefront these days is a leaf blower and some luck." That one got back to me from 3 different people. I ignored it. Try to be the bigger person. But Karen? She wasn't just envious. She was stewing. I learned quickly that Karen wasn't used to being ignored. Her house sat 2 lots down from mine, same side of the lake. Smaller lot. More weeds and grass. She had one of those prefab sheds she treated like a second living room, and a yappy dog that barked at anything louder than a butterfly. From what I gathered, she'd bought her place during the housing dip a few years back, paid cash, and ever since, she had this attitude like she owned the neighborhood, or was supposed to. But here I was, a guy barely on speaking terms with her, making her property look like a dumpster fire by comparison, and I wasn't even trying. That drove her nuts. One day, I was raking leaves near the shoreline when I noticed her standing by the edge of her own dock, arms crossed, watching me, not waving, not saying a word, just watching. I nodded. She didn't nod back, just turned and walked off. The air around here is supposed to smell like pine trees and lake water, but with Karen next door, it was starting to stink of resentment. What started as cold shoulders turned into full-on gossip. I started hearing whispers. He's so antisocial. Never comes to the neighborhood barbecue. Probably thinks he's better than us. That would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. I was the one who always waved first. I showed up to 2 of those damn BBQs and brought enough beer for double the people. But facts didn't matter when Karen was holding court. At one point, she started this rumor that I was only keeping the lakefront nice to flip it. Claimed I had developers lined up. That one caught me off guard. I was fixing up the land for me, for my family, not to sell. But facts, again, didn't matter. I realized she didn't just resent my property. She resented me for having it, for loving it, for making it something worth loving. And then came the party. It was mid-spring. Birds were back. Lake was warming up. I was hauling mulch from my truck to the waterline when Karen approached, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She didn't greet me, just said, "So, I'm hosting a graduation party in a couple weeks. Your shoreline's got the best spot for photos. When would be a good time to set up?" I froze. I genuinely thought she was joking. She wasn't. "Karen," I said, keeping my tone polite, "that's private property." She scoffed. "Yeah, I know, but it's not like you use it. I just need a few hours. You could be inside or whatever. We'll be respectful." I laughed. It wasn't out of spite. It just came out. She looked stunned. "I'm serious," she snapped. "So am I," I said. "That's a hard no." What happened next was classic Karen. She muttered something about me being lazy, entitled, and a terrible neighbor, then stormed back up the hill toward her house. It was the first shot across the bow, the start of something much uglier than I could have imagined. I had no clue that one denied party was about to spiral into lawsuits, environmental violations, and the kind of revenge no HOA manual could prepare you for. The thing about narcissists like Karen, when they don't get what they want, they don't let it go, they plot. They fantasize about revenge the way most people fantasize about vacations. So when I denied her a party on my property, I expected dirty looks, cold shoulders, maybe some more gossip. What I didn't expect was that she'd double down again and again. What started with a laughable request quickly became a war of attrition. And my mistake? I underestimated just how far Karen was willing to go to stake a claim to land that never belonged to her in the first place. Karen didn't just walk away in a huff after I said no. She seethed. I saw in the way she stomped back across the lot, her fists clenched like she was holding in a tantrum. I thought that was the end of it. A weird, entitled moment from a woman who'd already shown signs of delusion. But I was wrong. The next day, I found a note taped to my door. It read, "I'm sorry things got off on the wrong foot yesterday. I still think this party would be a great opportunity for the community. Let me know if you reconsider. Karen, no apology. Just a PR statement from a woman who thought she was mayor of Lakeview Lane." I ignored it. And the next message. And the next. Over the next 10 days, I got texts from an unfamiliar number, later confirmed to be hers, emails to my personal and HOA inbox, and even another printed letter. This one folded into a plastic baggie and hung from my mailbox with a twist tie like a sick joke. I never responded. And that silence, that's what pushed her over the edge. Her polite tone didn't last long. When my silence didn't break, Karen escalated. She began laying the groundwork for a full-on character assassination campaign. First, I overheard her talking to the Bennetts, an older couple down the road who rarely got involved in neighborhood drama. "He's impossible to talk to," she said, loud enough for me to hear from across the fence. "Won't even respond to a simple request. I'm starting to think he has something to hide." Then came the social posts. She started a private Facebook group called Lakeview Neighbors United. I wasn't invited, of course, but my buddy Greg, who lived 2 houses down, took screenshots. The posts weren't direct attacks, but they drip with implication. Some folks just don't understand what it means to be part of a community. If you've ever been denied access to the public shoreline, you're not alone. Public? She was already trying to rewrite the map. I kept my head down, thinking she'd get bored, but instead, she started pushing for access again. Only this time, not as a request. This time, it was a demand wrapped in fake neighborhood unity. After a few weeks, things seemed to quiet down. No more letters. No more Facebook gossip, or at least none reported to me. It felt like the whole situation had burned itself out. Finally, I let myself exhale. I even went back to working on the shoreline, replanting some river grass and fixing up the dock steps that spring. Everything was calm, normal, peaceful. I remember thinking to myself, maybe she got the message. I was wrong. What I didn't know was that Karen wasn't finished. She was regrouping. I should have seen the signs. Her yard was more active than usual. Trucks coming and going. Contractors measuring things at odd hours. A stack of fencing materials delivered one morning while I was inside working. At the time, I thought maybe she was finally cleaning up her own property. improving her shoreline. A couple of weeks later, I had to leave town unexpectedly. My sister in North Carolina was going through a tough divorce, and I promised I'd help her move out her place. I figured it'd be a weekend trip, 4 days, tops. But then my truck broke down halfway there. I ended up extending my stay to 2 full weeks to help with movers, her kids, and some last-minute paperwork. During that time, I got the usual text from the alarm company confirming the property was secure, and a check-in call from my friend Greg, who said everything looked quiet. Everything, he said, seemed normal, but what none of us realized was that Karen wasn't just planning something. She had already started. I got home on a sunny Wednesday afternoon, worn out from the drive, excited for a cold beer and a walk down to the lake. I pulled into the gravel driveway and immediately froze. What I saw made my stomach drop. There it was, a fence that had no business being there. Karen had built a perimeter fence, not just around her property, but around mine, too. The entire shared lakeshore was now sectioned off with a slapdash wall of vertical slats, mismatched panels, and galvanized posts that screamed hastily thrown together. It was hideous, and more importantly, illegal. She hadn't fenced off just her side. She'd wrapped around the shared walking path, extended through public right-of-way, and crossed directly into my property lines, slicing across my path to the dock like a steel slap in the face. At the far end of the fence, a crude gate with a padlock. I parked, got out of my truck, and stood at the edge of the fence like a tourist at the wrong zoo. A hand-painted sign hung on the lock gate. Lake access requires permit. Inquire at lot number 12. Lot 12. Karen's house. I thought this was a joke, some kind of prank. But when I stepped back and looked at the full extent of it, the ugly stretch circling a good portion of the lakeshore, cutting off access to multiple properties, I knew something was very wrong. The question wasn't if I was going to fight back. The question was how soon I could make this woman's world come crashing down. There's a unique kind of rage that comes when someone hijacks your land and has the audacity to sell access to it. Standing there, staring at a crooked wooden fence slicing across my lakefront, all I could think about was how deep Karen's delusion must run. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was a declaration of war. And if she thought I was the type to let it slide, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I didn't need a crime scene unit to tell me who built the fence. The damn sign pointed straight to her. Lake access requires permit. Inquire at lot number 12. Lot number 12 was Karen's. She was already running a little shoreline scam, charging people access fees to my dock, my trees, my water. I walked the perimeter. The fence wasn't just illegal, it was idiotic. Panels were zip-tied together in some places. Posts weren't even cemented. It looked like someone hired a crew off Craigslist and gave them a deadline of yesterday. As I rounded the far end, I spotted a couple of lawn chairs inside the fence area, and people sitting in them. Strangers. 2 teens and a middle-aged couple, sipping sodas and enjoying the lake like it was some kind of park. I called out, "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" The guy looked confused. "We paid for access." "You what?" "Karen, lot 12, said it was private access. $20 a day. I don't remember walking away. I don't remember getting back to my porch. I do remember the blood rushing in my ears, the shaking in my hands. And I remember the single thought I couldn't shake. She's making money off my damn land. That night, I barely slept. I sat at my kitchen table, lights off, staring out at the dark shape of that fence under the moonlight. Why? That was the word that wouldn't let go. Was it about money? Unlikely. Karen wasn't exactly broke. Her car was newer than mine. Her house was messy, but not falling apart. Maybe it was power. Maybe she wanted control over something, anything. Or maybe it was about me, about the fact that I had something she didn't, that I took care of something she'd never earned. Maybe this was her way of taking it back, not just the land, but the respect she thought she deserved. It wasn't just a fence. It was a challenge, an attempt to own something that was never hers, and take me down in the process. But here's the thing about challenging someone on their own ground. You better be ready to lose. By morning, I was done being mad. Now I was methodical. I pulled out the property deed, the plat map, the zoning diagrams, every document I had. And just like I thought, the fence line cut well into my lot. 14 feet across on one side, 8 on the other. And that was just my parcel. From the map, it looked like she might have infringed on public right-of-way, too. This wasn't just annoying. It was criminal trespass, property encroachment, and possibly fraud, if she was profiting from land she didn't own. I started taking photos. Angles. Distances. Even dropped GPS pins using a surveyor's app one found online. Then I hit up my friend Greg. You still got that drone? Yeah. Why? Time to fly. We launched it from his back porch, and within minutes, we had a full aerial scan of the lakefront and the absurd fence that wrapped halfway around like some failed dystopian security perimeter. I dropped the footage onto a USB drive. Now I had proof. Now I needed a plan. People expect revenge to be fast and fiery. I was learning it's better when it's cold, calculated, and backed by 500 pages of legal precedent. I knew I couldn't just rip the fence down myself. That's what Karen would have wanted. She called the sheriff, play the victim, scream about property damage. I'd be the bad guy before I could say trespass. No, I needed to be smarter. So I started quietly talking to the neighbors. Not gossip, just questions. Had they seen the construction? Were they aware she was charging for lake access? Turns out they were. Some even had screenshots of the Facebook group Karen was using to market her lake club. She was charging $20 a day or $100 for a monthly pass. She claimed she had exclusive rights to the shoreline, something about a grandfather clause no one had ever heard of. Even better, no one was on her side. Not one person. The tide was turning. I booked a consultation with the best real estate and land use lawyer in the county, $400 an hour, and worth every penny. His first words after seeing the photos? Oh, yeah, we're going to destroy her. As my lawyer and I got to work, word started spreading. By week's end, 3 other neighbors came forward saying parts of the fence clipped their lines too. One had a tree chopped down by accident during construction. Another claimed Karen left a note asking them to relocate a kayak rack because it blocked the view. People weren't just angry, they were spooked. This wasn't just neighbor drama anymore. This was a hostile takeover. I organized a quiet community meeting on Greg's back deck. 6 households showed. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Can we sue her? My lawyer advised against a group suit. Just yet. Let me work the angle first, he said. It's stronger if she doesn't know it's coming. In the meantime, I asked everyone to send any evidence, photos, emails, texts, straight to me. I'd compile everything. The community, once quiet and divided, was now on my side. Karen thought she'd build a wall. All she did was build a coalition. You don't beat people like Karen with yelling or fistfights. You bury them under paperwork. You crush them with process. You smother them with laws they never bothered to read. And when they realize they've lost, they don't go out quietly. They scream. They flail. They accuse everyone of being the villain in a story where they were the ones holding the sword. Karen thought her little fence made her untouchable. She didn't realize she just triggered a legal avalanche she couldn't outrun. Karen had gone too far, and now the neighborhood knew it. Once quiet neighbors who'd stayed neutral during the gossip war were now realizing their land had been clipped, too. Her fence didn't just disrespect property lines. It cut into them like a cleaver. Folks who'd never even spoken more than a polite wave at the mailbox were suddenly trading screen grabs and drone photos like we were building a case for the Supreme Court. You know how you kill community spirit? Build a wall through it. You know how you rebuild it? Tear that wall down, together. Even the Bennetts, who used to defend Karen's strong personality, admitted she'd gone off the rails. Mrs. Bennett even told me she had tried to use her monthly pass to visit the shore, and Karen had yelled at her for bringing an unauthorized guest, her own granddaughter. The fence didn't just cut into our land. It cut into our trust. And when that goes, you've got nothing left but a reckoning. If there was one moment when things truly crossed a point of no return, it was when I confirmed the full extent of Karen's permit scam. She wasn't just charging for access. She was issuing physical passes, actual plastic lake access permits, printed with serial numbers and expiration dates. Greg had found one in his recycling bin, discarded by a guest. It had a logo. A logo. Karen had even created a bogus entity called Lakeview Community Shore Alliance. I nearly choked on my coffee when I saw it. The grift was next level. She was selling seasonal passes for $150, claiming that members could enjoy exclusive lakeside privileges through a partnership agreement with surrounding lot owners. She even referenced me by name in her flyer, without my knowledge. That was when I knew this wasn't just personal anymore. This was fraud. My lawyer's eyes practically lit up when I dropped the permit and the drone footage on his desk. She messed with the wrong shoreline, he said. Let's take her down. To be honest, I wasn't sure waterfront property lawyers were even a thing. They are, and mine was meaner than a snapping turtle in a hurricane. His name was Alan Grant. Yeah, like the guy from Jurassic Park. And he'd spent 15 years suing developers, land hoarders, and municipal regulators. The kind of guy who smiled when he said words like injunction, civil penalties, and restorative damages. I brought him every scrap of evidence. GPS maps, drone shots, neighbor testimonies, Karen's permit designs, and screenshots from her Lakeview Neighbors United group. He spent 2 hours going through everything without saying much. Then he leaned back, tapped his pen, and said, "This isn't a case. This is a buffet." We mapped out our attack. Step 1, file a formal complaint with the county zoning board. Step 2, alert the local water authority about unauthorized construction on protected shoreline. Step 3, submit a cease and desist letter paired with a civil lawsuit citing property encroachment, illegal commercial activity, and environmental violation of the riparian zone. Step 4, watch her squirm. I didn't just gather evidence. I curated it like a museum exhibit of neighborly nightmares. I had time-stamped photos, video walkthroughs, and Google Earth overlays. Greg's drone footage was spliced together in a slick little video that Alan planned to show in court if it came to that. We even had audio. Karen yelling at one of the teenagers for her entering the wrong gate without checking in first. Greg's teenage daughter had recorded it accidentally during a Snapchat story. That 15-second clip? Gold. Other neighbors came forward with receipts, Venmo transactions, and written notes from Karen instructing them not to share the access code with non-members. My lawyer called it the dumbest pyramid scheme he'd ever seen. We built a paper trail long enough to stretch around the lake twice. By the time Alan submitted everything, the complaint package looked more like a dissertation than a lawsuit. Karen's house was about to become the most legally radioactive property in the county. Our final move? An emergency injunction. It was a legal bullet, fast, direct, and devastating. The judge approved it within 3 days of filing, after reviewing our evidence. That fence was going down. Legally. Immediately. But here's the part I'll never forget. I asked if I could deliver the court notice myself. Alan raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Absolutely," I said. I want to see the look on her face. It was a cool Friday morning. The lake shimmered under a bright sky. I walked up to Karen's door, document envelope in hand. She opened it halfway, recognized me, and immediately scowled. "What the hell do you want?" I held out the envelope. "This is from the court. You're being ordered to remove the fence immediately. You have 7 days. She laughed. Actually laughed. "This fence isn't going anywhere. You think your little lawsuit scares me." Then she did what I half expected. She slammed the door. But what she didn't realize was that the clock had already started ticking. She thought she could ignore the law like she ignored basic boundaries. She was wrong. You can build a fence. You can spread lies. You can even try to profit off stolen ground. But when you slam a court order in the face of justice, you don't just break the law. You challenge the system that enforces it. And when that system answers back, it doesn't knock. It doesn't ask politely. It rolls up with steel-toed boots and demolition equipment, ready to flatten everything in its path. Karen refused the court's mercy. Now it was time for the consequences. Karen's door had barely finished rattling in its frame from her slam when I turned and walked back down her steps with my head high. She thought that slamming the door on me meant slamming the door on the law. But the thing about legal orders is, They don't need to be accepted to be enforced. The emergency injunction was on file with the county clerk and already forwarded to the code enforcement office. She had 7 days to comply. If she didn't, they'd do it for her. And the kicker? The bill wouldn't go to the county. It'd go to her. Every nail, every board, every hour of labor. The paperwork didn't just say take it down. It authorized the county to do it by force if she refused. I'd never seen bureaucracy move so fast, and for once, I was grateful it did. I delivered justice to her doorstep. She just chose not to open it. You could hear the screaming halfway down the block. 3 days after I served a notice, the code enforcement crew posted a second warning. This one on the actual fence gate. Big orange paper. Laminated. Impossible to miss. That's when the fireworks started. Karen burst out her house barefoot and in a fury, ripping the notice off like it was a death sentence. She screamed at the workers. At me. At the trees. At the birds. "You're ruining my life," she shrieked across the fence line. "You trespassed," I calmly replied, standing on my side of the boundary. "You stole my peace. You stole my property." Then came the real threat. "I'm not moving this fence. Ever. Not unless you bring an army." Funny thing was, I didn't need an army. Just a county-approved demolition crew with the law on their side. The 7-day deadline passed. No response. No compliance. Not even a phone call from Karen's fake Lakefront Alliance. So the county acted. At 8:02 a.m. on a Thursday morning, 2 flatbed trucks and a backhoe rolled onto the lane like a sheriff's posse in a Western. They didn't knock on her door. They didn't hesitate. They started at the far end of the fence, where the structure jutted past the public access path and into my lot. Within minutes, the boards were clattering down like matchsticks. The crew moved fast, precision, efficiency, no drama. Karen came running out like it was a hostage situation. "You can't do this," she yelled. The crew chief handed her a copy of the court order. "We can, and we are." I stood at a safe distance with coffee in hand, watching as the wall came down. Panel after panel, post after post. The gate she padlocked was the first thing to go. And the best part? They saved the receipts. Every hour, every nail, every foot of chain link and wooden board removed was itemized. That invoice, $18 for 22, was sent directly to Karen's mailbox. Stamped, due immediately. You could feel the silence around her house like a vacuum. No music, no dog barking, no cars in the driveway. Just a slow unraveling of a woman who'd finally realized her delusion had a price tag. But the fence removal was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, the dominoes fell fast. Zoning fines for unpermitted construction, $3,000. Environmental agency fees for disturbing protected shoreline flora, $5,500. Commercial use of residential land violations, triggered by her permit scam, $7,000. Plus back taxes the assessor's office slapped on her for the unauthorized business operation. Total penalties? Over $35,000. And that didn't include the potential civil damages from my lawsuit, which was still active and waiting in the wings. Karen had turned a $1,000 illegal fence into a financial crater, and she was falling into it fast. If Karen thought her reputation and wallet couldn't take more damage, she underestimated one last thing. The Department of Environmental Conservation. Apparently, during fence construction, her team had cleared native shoreline brush and driven posts into the water's edge, violating the protected riparian buffer zone regulations. That meant habitat destruction, erosion risk, disturbed wildlife zones. The DEC wasn't just mad, they were aggressive. They issued a mandatory restoration order requiring replanting of native species, soil stabilization, and water testing at her expense. And the kicker? She had to hire an approved contractor and submit progress reports for 12 months. Estimated cost? Another $12,000. By now, the story had leaked into the local paper. The headline? Fence Folly. Local woman faces legal storm for lake access scam. Her name was on it. Her photo was, too. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pity. I felt justice. She had built a fence to shut others out. but she'd only managed to lock herself in. Some people go down swinging. Others go down screaming. Karen? She went down howling. When the system she defied came crashing down on her with court orders, restoration fees, and public shame, she did what all paper queens do when their cardboard castles burn. She panicked. She blamed everyone. She ran. But the funny part? The very which she used to fence me out ended up marking my victory. And what was once her greatest mistake became the foundation for my finest boundary. After the article hit the local paper, Karen might as well have become a ghost. No more Facebook rants. No more parties. No more self-made lake permits tacked to her mailbox. The neighborhood, once curious and cautious around her, turned cold. Her name stopped being whispered and started being avoided. Even the Bennetts, who once defended her, started referring to her as that woman. Her so-called supporters unfriended her. Her phone calls went unanswered. The mail carrier told me he hadn't seen her come out in 3 days. When people did spot her, she was unkempt, disheveled, muttering things to herself as she paced near her mailbox. Sometimes she just stood there, staring out at the empty space where the fence once stood. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked lost. She'd gambled everything. Her pride, her money, her standing in the community. And all she had left was an empty lot and a stack of bills taller than the fence had ever been. It didn't take long before the for sale sign appeared. One morning, I stepped outside to the sound of a truck backing into her driveway, professional movers, boxes, a folded patio umbrella, that cursed lawn flamingo, all loaded in silence. Karen didn't wave, didn't speak. She kept her head down and her hoodie up. 3 days later, she was gone. Word spread that she had taken a cash buyout just to get out fast. A real estate investor scooped it up at a discount. Rumor was she'd use most of the funds to pay off fines and avoid additional liens from the DEC. No going-away party. No tearful goodbyes. She vanished the way she'd lived in that house, angrily, loudly, and alone. The community didn't celebrate. We exhaled, like a storm had finally passed. I waited a few weeks before doing anything. Let the land breathe. Let the peace return. But eventually, I started restoring what Karen had marred. The soil along the lakefront had been disrupted, scarred from the fence posts. I worked with a local conservation group to plant native grasses, river birch, and milkweed for the butterflies. A gentle slope replaced a muddy trench where her so-called gate used to be. And the boundary? Oh, it was marked. Not with a fence. Not with neon signs or surveillance cameras. I used her fence wood, salvaged the best boards from the demolition pile, sanded them, stained them, and shaped them into simple, elegant boundary markers. Low posts spaced tastefully along the shore. Discreet, respectful, unmistakable. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen had built a monument to arrogance. I turned it into a tribute to restraint. You'd think that would be the end of it, but the county wasn't done. Inspired by the whole debacle, and probably embarrassed by how far things had gone without early intervention, they took swift action. The zoning board updated shoreline construction ordinances, clarified definitions, tightened regulations around private lake access, share paths, and boundary dispute resolutions. A new clause, unofficially dubbed the Karen Clause, required all future fence projects near the lakefront to be approved by both adjacent property owners and the Environmental Review Committee. They even invited me to a town hall meeting to speak on it. I kept it simple. Respect doesn't start with a fence. It starts with knowing where the line is and never trying to move it. Applause. Smiles. For the first time since the war began, I felt peace. Real peace. They say good fences make good neighbors. But Karen's fence made me something better, aware. Aware of how fragile community can be. Aware of how fast entitlement can become aggression. And aware of how powerfully justice works when you let it take its time. I never set out to ruin Karen's life. I just wanted to protect what was mine. But when she turned the property line into a battleground, she left me no choice but to fight back. With truth, with law, with patience. And in the end, justice didn't come with a bang. It came with a quiet, satisfying snap of wood being removed, and the louder silence of a neighbor who finally ran out of excuses.